Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are going to absolutely shatter that Hollywood-fueled perception you might have of drug cartels, and we're going to rebuild it with the shocking 2026 reality. Honestly, if your mental image of a cartel still involves small-time smugglers operating in the shadows, prepare to have your perspective totally rewritten. We are diving deep into how these organizations have transformed into global, heavily armed, multi-trillion-dollar paramilitary empires. You know that classic myth of the drug smuggler? The rudimentary street thug, the desert backpacker hauling duffel bags, or the flashy local kingpin? Yeah, scratch that. That era is completely over. The reality of today is what we call the paramilitary technocrat. Modern cartels are highly sophisticated conglomerates, and they're run by corporate executives. They deploy heavily mechanized standing armies and manage these insanely complex multinational logistical supply chains that honestly rival Fortune 500 companies. They aren't just smuggling anymore. They are literally waging global asymmetric warfare. All right, let's get right into Section 1, Evolution of the Super Cartel, a Century of Escalation. To really understand this, we have to look back at the last century, because we've witnessed a fascinating and frankly violent evolution. Back in the 1920s, operations relied on the plaza system. It was basically a highly predictable, regulated system of corruption with local politicians. Fast forward to the 1980s, and boom, you have the Guadalajara cartel, the very first super cartel. They totally shattered the old rules of engagement, especially after the tragic murder of US DEA agent Kiki Camarena in 1985. But the real game changer? That was 2006. The US and Mexico rolled out the kingpin strategy, which massively militarized the conflict to decapitate those old empires. But guess what? It didn't end the syndicates. Instead, it triggered a Hydra effect. By removing the top bosses, they basically forced the cartels to evolve into these hyper-adaptive, self-sufficient, and ultra-violent cellular networks. Moving on to Section 2, the modern corporate blueprint. Franchises, not fiefdoms. Let's actually contrast the two big superpowers dominating the landscape today, because it's a stark difference. On one side, we have the Sinaloa cartel. They operate as a federated alliance. They're highly political, decentralized, and deeply, deeply embedded in local economies. They often even present themselves to rural populations as paternal protectors. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum is the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, or CJNG. They operate as a corporate paramilitary. Think of them as a massive multinational corporation, just with a much, much deadlier HR department. They rely on centralized command and raw, terror-driven military expansion. They don't negotiate. They issue ultimatums, what they call plata or plomo. You either accept the silver, the bribe, or you accept the lead, the bullet. Their operational blueprint for 2026 is literally a strict 5-tier corporate system cascading down from the top. At step 1, you've got the Executive Council. That's the board of directors acting as macro strategists. Step 2 brings us to the plaza bosses, who operate autonomously, kind of like regional managers. But step 3, that is absolutely critical for their survival, the technocrats. These are highly educated chemists, accountants, and encrypted communications engineers who keep the whole machine humming. Step 4 consists of the armed wings. We're talking literal standing armies with military-grade equipment. And finally, at step 5, you have the local street cells. These are the lookouts and localized hitmen who, sadly, serve as completely disposable infantry. Okay, Section 3, the multi-trillion-dollar economy, diversifying beyond the drugs. This part is wild. Their invisible impact on your daily life is staggering. Through agribusiness extortion, they actually place mandatory narco taxes on the everyday avocados and limes you buy in your local grocery store. I mean, it's an absurd but highly lucrative reality. They've also corporatized human smuggling. They tax every single human being attempting to cross the U.S. border with a transit fee known as a piso. They're even tapping into state-owned oil pipelines to siphon millions of barrels of oil annually, alongside controlling illegal logging operations. And of course, there's synthetic dominance. They manufacture highly lucrative fentanyl and meth in hidden industrial labs 365 days a year, totally free from the constraints of crop weather. So you might be wondering, how on earth do you move billions of dollars in profit without tripping every international banking alarm? Well, the answer lies in highly complex financial loops. The most notable one is trade-based money laundering, or TBML. Basically, this is the process of converting illicit cash into clean, legitimate commercial revenue by purchasing and internationally reselling everyday retail consumer goods. Let's walk through this loop because it's brilliant, albeit totally illegal. Step 1. Cartels take their illicit U.S. street cash and buy legitimate consumer goods, stuff like electronics or textiles, right inside the United States. Step 2. These goods are legally exported and shipped to storefronts in Mexico or South America. Step 3. The goods are sold to everyday consumers for clean, local currency. The end result? A totally self-contained financial cycle that seamlessly converts drug money into clean corporate revenue, bypassing Western banking systems entirely. They also heavily utilize Chinese underground banking networks to create very similar seamless loops. And for sure, they are moving aggressively into the digital age. They employ armies of what they call Smurfs to make thousands of microtransactions on everyday apps like Venmo to avoid banking limits. But at the high level, cartels are leveraging digital assets. And no, they aren't using Bitcoin. That's way too easy for intelligence agencies to track on the blockchain. Instead, they favor anonymized privacy tokens like Monero. They use these alongside digital asset mixers to tumble their funds and move massive amounts of capital globally at the speed of light. It leaves absolutely zero paper trail. Next up is Section 4, High-Tech Smuggling and Espionage, Breaching the Invisible Border. These syndicates operate with terrifying engineering precision. This isn't just trekking through the desert anymore. They infiltrate legal U.S. ports of entry by hiding ultra-concentrated synthetics deep inside legitimate commercial cargo. They're exploiting the fact that authorities literally can't inspect every single truck without freezing global trade. Out in the ocean, they deploy radar-deflecting narco-subs and fully autonomous GPS-guided ghost vessels. Underground, they are digging 90-foot-deep industrial tunnels, completely outfitted with rail carts, electricity, and ventilation. And in the sky, they use UAV drone swarms to make precision payload drops, or they intentionally swarm border sensors to exhaust patrol teams and just blind the radar. And their intel? It literally rivals sovereign nations. They have constructed their own hidden, nationwide shadow radio networks across mountain peaks just to communicate securely. They deploy tactical IMS catchers, often called stingrays, to intercept real-time police cellular traffic before raids even happen. They are acquiring sovereign-grade zero-click spyware, like Pegasus, to hack the phones of high-ranking military officials and prosecutors. And on the ground, they rely on the Falcon network. This is a massive human intelligence web made up of hundreds of thousands of civilian lookouts, taxi drivers, street vendors, all armed with encrypted smartphones, working alongside dual-badge moles embedded directly into law enforcement academies. Which brings us to Section 5, the Paramilitary Order of Battle, Heavy Mechanized Warfare. Cartels enforce their territorial sovereignty with extreme firepower. We are talking about Barrett .50 caliber sniper rifles and RPGs specifically used to pierce military armor. They utilize man-pads, shoulder-fired surface-to-air missiles that are capable of downing military helicopters, basically enforcing their own local no-fly zones. On the ground, they patrol in Monstroyos. These are commercial heavy-duty trucks that have been custom-engineered into heavily armored tactical tanks, complete with machine gun turrets. And from above, they launch asymmetric airstrikes using commercial drones modified to drop military-grade IEDs right on rival command centers. To put the sheer scale of the 2026 Order of Battle into perspective, it is staggering. These are not street gangs. They are hostile standing armies. CJNG commands up to 50,000 active combatants globally, spearheaded by their highly disciplined Grupo Elite. The Sinaloa cartel boasts up to 45,000 factional combatants just to protect its massive international money laundering loops. And even the Gulf cartel, while highly fragmented these days, maintains an army of up to 20,000 enforcers, holding a lucrative stranglehold over the critical Texas border plazas. It's pure psychological warfare. These forces execute devastating psyops to control populations and governments. They rely on theatrical public executions and gruesome social media broadcasts to instill terror. When one of their leaders is targeted, they launch narco-blocks. They hijack and burn commercial vehicles across major highways to completely paralyze urban infrastructure and trap civilians indoors. They will even indiscriminately target innocent civilians, opening fire on public streets just to blackmail the state into retreating. And to maintain total sovereignty, they engage in political decapitation, systematically assassinating Democratic candidates and journalists who refuse to bow to their logistical needs. And finally, Section 6, a global asymmetric threat, the complete encirclement. Let's zoom out for a second. They have built a truly borderless web of sabotage. Cartels have established permanent logistics hubs in Europe, infiltrating massive commercial ports in places like Antwerp and Rotterdam. In West Africa, they use weak governance to build transit corridors, which effectively ends up funding localized extremist terror cells in the process. In the Indo-Pacific, they maintain these symbiotic pipelines with Chinese chemical syndicates to secure massive shipments of fentanyl precursors. and they are completely destabilizing sovereign nations. Just look at Ecuador. It was plunged into state-level chaos and nationwide terrorism when Mexican cartels financed local prison gangs just to control strategic shipping ports. And here is the absolute kicker, the most critical realization of our era. By flooding the West with lethal synthetics manufactured with Asian precursors, cartels operate as inadvertent proxies for hostile foreign states. Without ever declaring a formal war, they are continuously hollowing out Western civilian health, draining domestic security resources, and severely degrading military readiness. They are achieving what traditional adversary militaries cannot: the systematic erosion of human capital from within. So I'm going to leave you with this final vital thought to take away from this explainer today. Given everything we've just uncovered, their mechanized standing armies, their Fortune 500 level global logistics, and their multi-trillion-dollar diversified operations, can we really still call this a war on drugs? Or must we finally recognize it for what it truly is? A global war on sovereign stability.